Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to talk about failed bodies of knowledge. All right. So, of course, I love Dungeons & Dragons, and skills are a huge part of Dungeons & Dragons. But I think most people know skills are not great in Dungeons & Dragons. It doesn't feel like they've ever gotten dialed in well. They always feel like kind of a vestigial tale, and like we're still moving toward a good skill system. Okay, so with that, I definitely feel that I love Dungeons & Dragons, but this is a weak point of the game. I would really like to see it get fixed in 6th edition. Right, so I'm really putting this here in hopes that the design team will pick this up for 6th edition and move it forward. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. So I've been thinking about myself and what are my skills, right? So one, I when it comes to tech, I have a very high skill level in tech. I love tech. It comes very naturally. I've been doing it for a long time. You know, like I'm very proficient in tech. Right? I have a high skill level in tech. Those roles are going to be, there's going to be a high plus number, like 4 or 5 after it when it comes to tech for me, right? There's a few other reading and writing, just very high for me, right? Again, just something I excel at, right? I have 2 degrees. I come from a very literate family. Blah blah blah, right? But okay, and so those both came with training. They came with a community. They came with practice, right? But I have 3 distinct failed bodies of knowledge. I have very specific bodies of knowledge where I learned something for a long period of time, like 6 to 18 months for each one of these. I learned a ton of information about these things, but the overall body of knowledge, the skills attached to them, were an absolute failure. Very distinct, okay? But by even going into these areas, it really carved out like a place in my heart and my mind. And I know a lot about these things, but I also have a weird negative attachment to them now in some ways. So I'm just going to lay them all out here right now. And what I want is I want Dungeons & Dragons to start attaching failed bodies of knowledge to player characters, because they would have them. And I think this is especially a player character, right? Because guess what? I ain't an NPC in life. I'm a player character, right? Like, I'm an interesting person. I go on adventures in real life, really, like for realsies. I go on adventures in the fantasy world, and I go on adventures in the real world, right? Like that's just the way I roll, right? And the reality is, anybody who's going to be as adventurous as a player character, they're going to have these failed bodies of knowledge. And right now, they're not represented in any way in the game, right? And I can hear you. What about a skill level of 1? No, that's not it. That just means you haven't done it very long, and you're progressing toward being better and better and better, right? I'm talking about a halted, like stunted, scarred part of your heart and your mind that represents a failed body of knowledge with seared, weird, bizarre, like skills, like skrills attached to it. There's nothing like this in D&D now, but in real life, this is a very real thing. All right, so let's talk about it. Birding. I went into birding for about a year. All right, I loved it. And I would go around and I would look up in trees and I would sight birds, and then I would identify the bird, and I would listen to their calls, and I would write them down on my bird life list. And it was really fun. I loved it, right? And I just kind of ramped up. I got the Sibley's Guide, and I started, being able to tell the difference between, male birds and female birds. And I was able to tell, I knew what a peregrine was, and I could tell the difference between perching birds and all these different types of, between, geese and falcons, and I was just learning a lot. I was really digging it, right? And then I started interacting with the community. I would go to birding events, right? And I'd come back from the birding event, and I would gather up with the other birders, and they would, get a list and, start, what'd you see today? And somebody say, I saw an American robin, right? By the way, American robins are the worst. They're everywhere. They're the bane of birders, right? Nobody wants to see them. They're boring. They're everywhere, right? So I would come back and I would say, oh, hey, I saw a red-breasted gracklefarp. And they go, hey, you didn't see a red-breasted gracklefarp. And I was like, I did. And they're like, no. The red-breasted gracklefarp comes from 1,200 miles away, Scott. It ain't in this area right now. And I would say, well, it's possible that one got over here. And they said, yes, it's possible. There's about a 1% chance. But there's a 99% chance that you saw a red-breasted hooble-dooble, right? And I would be like, no, I saw a red-breasted gracklefarp, right? And they're like, no, you did not, right? And then it would get very contentious, right? And there'd be heat in the room. And within 3 months, I had beef with 4 different birders who had called into question my sighting, right? Now, other birders, right, what they did was they would just be like, well, I've only been birding for 3 months. This other person has been birding for 20 years. I'm probably wrong. But I don't roll like that. I know what I saw. I don't care if that person's been birding for 20 years. I saw a red-breasted gracklefarp. I know it, right? So it just didn't work out, right? And I had to quit birding because birding just had too much conflict, right? But I have this weird amount of knowledge about birds in my heart, in my heart and in my mind. I got a crap ton of Sibley guides, and I still cannot pass a birding guide to this day that I've never seen or do not own without buying it. It's weird, right? And I'm terrible at birding. I'm a terrible birder, right? But I kind of love it. But I'm really bad at it, right? And it's a failed body of knowledge, right? And I would love for player characters to start to have, and there to be mechanics attached to this weird thing where the player character absolutely loves this thing, but is really bad at it, right? The thing I would really also, I am desperately begging for this to be in Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. And one of the reasons why we have power gamers today is because the game doesn't simulate life in these weird, delightful ways, right? I'm not saying to put, and believe it or not, this weird agitating hobby that I wasted a year on is a delight to me. It's a delightful failure in my life, right? And I think it would be delightful in our games to explore and to actually map some character to these player characters, right? Characters supposed to be there, right? I'll give you another example of a failed body of knowledge. Astronomy. Tried to get into astronomy, right? I love space travel, and I really love space travel. I love space. I love looking up at the stars. So I got into astronomy, right? So I got these planographs, right? They're these circular things, and they show all the constellations, and you spin them around, and they have clear overlays, right? And I got books, and I was reading, and I had apps, and I was learning all the constellations, right? And sure enough, same thing. It went wrong when I hit the community, right? Not just the community, right? Not just the community. There were a few things I didn't like. And actually, it wasn't the community that really was the problem. One, the community of astronomy was not welcoming. It really was. They weren't rude in any way. They were just really dialed into what they were doing. Their equipment was very, very expensive. And if you didn't know what you were doing, and they let you look at the telescope, and you even bumped it, it could take 45 minutes to just fix the silly mistake you made, right? So there were very real aspects of astronomy that made it very unuser-friendly, and longtime astronomists really were not super happy about bringing in new hobbyists overall, because it's so hard to bring them up, and the equipment is very, very delicate and very expensive. Right? But that was not the main problem with astronomy, by the way. By the way, I'm connected to many different communities that are very, very nice. I think one of the issues why I bounced out of these two hobbies was there wasn't super nice people to help me get over the hurdles, right? There might have been a couple, but overall, at the macro level, these communities really weren't that welcoming, in my opinion, right? But that wasn't the biggest problem with astronomy. What I really found out was when you get into astronomy, you need to go to places where there's very little light, okay, to see really cool events in the sky, right? Well, guess what? In order to see really cool events in the sky, you need to go to places where there's extremely little light in the middle of the night. Well, it is cold, and you find yourself in places where it's easy to be murdered because there's no light and nobody knows. Like, you literally find yourself in places nobody can hear you scream, right? I was like, this is a weird hobby, man. It's cold and I can't see anyone around here, and it's dark. I don't like this. Like, it was a strange hobby, right? And I'm like, man, and then I was also like, maybe it makes sense that the people in astronomy who like to be in super dark, cold places that nobody else is in the middle of the night, maybe it's not a coincidence they're not super nice, right? Like, it was just, and so astronomy, I know a lot about, constellations, about stars, but like, it didn't work out. I just kind of bounced out of astronomy. There you go, right? Like, it's a second stunted thing, right? But I have a love of constellations, I have a love of space, and I have a love of astronomy, but I will never return to it, right? And it's this weird, failed body of knowledge, and I would love for this exact thing to be mapped into Dungeons & Dragons. The last one is what I'm doing now, which is I am a world-ranked international speed cuber, right? So I solve 3x3 magic cubes. Most people know them as Rubik's Cubes, right? But I'm absolutely terrible at it. I'm really, really slow comparatively to most speed cubers, right? I've only been to 2 events so far. In my first one, I literally came in last. And in my second one, I came in second to last, right? Now, I'm totally happy with those numbers, right? Because I'm just there to experience the community, do the thing, and get better each time, right? I'm okay with that. Most people aren't. Most people don't like to lose. Garibays have a thick skin. We're very used to loss, so it's really not a problem. So, but cubing is another one of these things where I love it. I'm so that has one of the best communities I've ever seen. The speed cubing community is amazing. They're very welcoming. The hobby is fantastic. The equipment's fantastic. It's cheap. It's wonderful. It's a great, great hobby. I love it. Absolutely love it. But it is very hard, right? And I'm not as good at it as I would like to be. And in a way, it's kind of a failed body of knowledge. Now, I may get better at that one. I may stay in it. But I would really love Dungeons & Dragons to start to be able to reflect these hobbies, these interests, where a player character is absolutely fascinated by it, but absolutely terrible at it. And right now, there's no mechanical way to reflect this in the game. And there really should be. And not only would this make the game more fun, more delightful, but it would be a real smack in the face to power gamers, which I would love to see. They need a good smack in the face. Good game design smack in the face, not a literal smack in the face. No one deserves a literal smack in the face. But yeah, but I think they got that game design smack in the face coming, right? Because every single game, they're gaming, smacking people in the face with their knowledge of the game and pushing people back and making people rewrite their sheets and a whole bunch of other problems, right? So I think this would be a good way to handle that issue. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion on the subject. Would you like to see this in Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.